Hi everyone, this is Joe. I wanted to put together a little video about that Hexapuff blanket that I've seen out on Ravelry, so I decided to show you the way I was doing it. In the video that she did, she actually showed knitting individual hexapuffs, these little hexagons that have polyfill inside of them, and they actually do feel really cool. She's kind of right about that. The thing I didn't like was thinking about creating hundreds of these things and then sewing them all together. So instead I decided, and the way I looked at it, I've never seen her pattern before, so I don't know what the actual pattern calls for. But what it looks like she does is it looks like she does a similar thing to a toe-up sock with regular increase on the outside. So basically from the bottom, it looks like she casts on using some sort of figure-8 type of cast on so that it seems like a seamless type of cast on there, and then she increases, and this would be the bottom obviously, but she increases as she goes up the diagonal on either side, just like you would for the toe of a sock, and then she increases in the same, or decreases in the same way, and then Kitchener's off at the top after she puts her polyfill inside. And then I think she's going to sew together all those different hexagons. I do a very similar thing. In essence, what I do is I use US 2 needles, I think that's 2.5 millimeter, and I actually cast on a total of 24 stitches in my first round. So I cast on 24 here, and then I increase 2 on this side and 2 on this side every other round. So in essence, 4 increases every other round until I get to the widest part of the hexagon, which is this part up here, where I have 56 stitches. So in essence, I use 4 needles, or 5 needles in total to knit in the round like I would for a toe-up sock. And in this one I have 14 stitches per needle. So I start off with 6 stitches per needle, increasing 4 stitches or 1 stitch per needle on the outside edge, 2 on the side, 2 on this side, until I get up to 56 total stitches, and then I start decreasing in a similar way. Every other round I decrease 2 stitches on this side and 2 stitches on this side. 2 stitches on this side, so I don't cover up the hexapuff there. And I do that until I get back down to the 6 stitches. Basically what I did was I measured what 24 stitches is down here, and then I measured my row gauge to find out how many rows I need to be able to make this length in a diagonal, and how many increases. Obviously I'd need to do that if I increased every other stitch. And it came out that it was pretty even when I cast on with a total of 24 stitches. By the time I got up to 56 stitches, it was about the same length as the cast on edge at the bottom. Got that so far. Again, so I didn't feel like I wanted to create these these figure-8 cast-ons and then Kitchener off the top of every one of my hexapuffs individually, nor did I want to sew together all those hexapuffs. So instead, I decided to create all mine in a row. And so I'd actually create one on top of the other. And in essence, the method I'm using both binds off the prior hexapuff and casts on for the next hexapuff at the same time. And that's the technique I'm going to show you today. Make sense? Okay. Here's what I have so far. So now I've created all this whole row of hexapuffs. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hexapuffs done so far. And at this point, I've decreased down, like I talked about, until I got to the 24 stitches remaining. And then I just break off my yarn, leaving a length of yarn that I'm going to use to actually sew up the rows of hexapuffs together. So there's still going to be some sewing to do, just a little bit less hopefully. And what I've done is I've actually put the needles on, put the 24 stitches on 2 separate needles. So you can see that I have what I'm going to call the back needle, which is towards you, and the front needle, which is towards me. And then I've got my leftover yarn from the last hexapuff. Now I'm going to actually take, so I've got 2 needles here, and I'm going to take 2 new needles here and hold them parallel to each other while I do this next part. Now this next part is a little finicky when it comes to it, but it's a lot less finicky than if I actually have to Kitchener off. Some people don't find Kitchener at all finicky. I don't really either, but but this eliminates the need to Kitchener off and graft off the top part of mine after I've put in the polyfill. But I do find the figure eight cast on, I do find that a little bit finicky. And so this kind of combines both of those into the same step and closes off and makes individual each of the different hexapuffs. So you're going to see how that's done. Now what I've done is, with the two needles, my waste yarn, my yarn from the last hexapuff, comes off the back needle, the one towards you, this needle here, okay? And what I'm going to do is, using these two needles and holding them kind of parallel to each other, and I'm going to try to get a little close here so you can see what this looks like. I'm actually going to use my front new needle to knit a stitch onto my new needle off the front of the old needle. Okay? So I've done the first of 24 stitches so far. And then using the new back needle, I'm going to purl a stitch off the old back needle. Okay? Sorry, again, this gets a little finicky and it gets a little bit hard to see, but I'm going to try to show you. So then I'm going to purl that stitch off the back needle. And I'm going to just keep doing that until all 24 stitches are moved. So I'll knit the front needle off the front needle onto the new front needle, and I'll purl, and so you see what you've got so far. At this point, I'm going to kind of intertwine those two needles. I've got 4 new stitches on the two new needles, right? And I've got the remaining 20 stitches on the old needle. And I'm just going to continue to alternate between knitting one off the front onto the front and purling off the back onto the back. Now that's the most finicky part of this process. Once you've got the first 4 to 6 stitches done, your needles don't fall off anymore. When I get towards the end of my old needles, you're going to see that it gets a little bit finicky again, because it's the needles will want to fall out, obviously, and obviously drop your stitches. So I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible so I can kind of show you the result. It's I may end up editing this part out because it's kind of like watching paint dry, so I apologize for that. But I do want to show you a little bit about what it's going to look like, and try to do that before Thaddeus comes down and kind of makes me start this whole video again by interrupting it. Alrighty, let's see. Now the whole purpose of knitting and purling alternately across the way, it does 2 things. One is it, using one continuous thread along the way, and I'll kind of show you what it looks like when it's all said and done, it kind of closes up the old hexapuff while at the same time binds on or casts on for the new hexapuff, right? Okay, I'm starting to get towards the last 6 stitches, so I just got to be very careful that I don't drop out the needles. It's kind of a pain if you do that. Alright, almost there. Sorry, needing to concentrate a bit more. Oops. See, one of the hard parts is, since you have to have your yarn in front of one stitch for purling and in back of the stitch for knitting, kind of making sure that it's in front of the correct needle and behind the correct needle and all that other stuff. It's a little bit hard to coordinate 4 separate needles, since you're knitting and purling from 2 onto 2 separate ones, right? Okay, almost there. 2 more stitches to go. I'll show you what I got. I also do want to show you the first row after you've created this bind off cast on combination. Now, one of the things you may have noticed if you've kept a sharp eye out is I actually didn't fill my last Hexapuff with polyfill, and so as a result, the fact that I'm binding this off, it will be bound off without any polyfill in it. I did that for a specific purpose. I wanted to show it. It's a little bit easier to show a flat Hexapuff, and I'm just going to undo that one and fill it up again after I'm off camera. How's that? Okay. So I have 24 new stitches. Now if you take a look at this closely, you're going to see that there's nothing, this is completely closed off because this blue yarn goes back and forth on the old stitches of the brown yarn in such a way that it closes that off and binds it off. Now one of the things you're going to see, and I'm going to turn the work around, this is my new yarn coming off this stitch. I'm actually going to pull that through these two needles. So I'm going to pull it up through so that I can start my, in essence, second row or second round of knitting, because I consider that cast on my first. And so since it's the second round, it's actually an increased row. So into my first stitch, now I'm going to be working all on the front needle, or what's front to me. I'm going to knit into the front and back of the first stitch for one, and then knit 5 more, 3, 4, 5, 6, for a total of 7 onto this needle. Then I'm going to start my next needle because I want to end up having total of, obviously 5 needles. So then I'm picking up my next needle, I knit the last 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on the 6th one I'm going to knit into the front and back of the stitch again. And then starting on the back of my work, again I start with an increase, so it's going to be knit into the front and back of that stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then, sorry, I have to get another needle for the last needle of my round, and then I knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then in the last one I'm going to knit into the front and back of the stitch again. 6, 7. So what I've in essence done is created the first round, or second round in this case, by increasing into the first and last stitch of every, knitting into the front and back of the first and last stitch of the front needle and the back needle. So now I have 14 on the back 2 and 14 on the front 2, right? And so what I'm going to do now is start my rounds in essence the same way I would for any kind of toe-up sock. I hope that makes sense. And once I get up to this one, obviously I'm going to fill up this one, and since it's already closed off to the one below it, the polyfill can't go through, and each one of these hexapuffs is independently closed off to the next one in such a way that you've got a whole row of hexapuffs that you're now working with. Hope that made some sense, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave some comments. Thanks.